Every family has one Christmas they never forget. Mine ended with my own, mother pointing at the front door, while snow blew through the porch, light and shouting, "Get out! Take your daughter and don't come back." My little girl was only 4 years old. She didn't understand why Grandma hated us that night. She only knew everyone at the table had stopped eating to stare. My name is Emily Carter, and 8 years ago, I believe family was the one thing you could always count on. I was wrong. My husband had died 10 months earlier in a construction accident outside Columbus, Ohio, one phone call destroyed. The future we'd spent, 12 years building together. The insurance payout disappeared into medical bills, funeral costs, and the mortgage I couldn't keep up with alone. I worked mornings at a grocery store bakery and cleaned offices after dark, but every paycheck vanished before the month was over. By December, I had sold my wedding ring, my husband's truck, and almost everything worth selling. My daughter Lily never complained. She'd smile over peanut butter sandwiches and tell me they were her favorite, even though I knew she missed the meals her dad used to cook. When Mom invited us for Christmas dinner, I thought maybe she finally understood how hard life had become. I even spent my last $30 on a small sweater for Lily, because I wanted her to look nice around the family. We arrived carrying a homemade apple pie since I couldn't afford gifts for everyone. The moment we walked in, I noticed the silence. My younger brother Ryan and his wife had new jewelry. My sister Melissa talked about their ski vacation while my mother admired the expensive presents stacked beneath the tree. Nobody asked how we were doing. Nobody asked if we had enough to eat. They only glanced at the pie like it didn't belong there. During dinner, Ryan joked that I should stop playing the widow card and find another man to pay my bills. The table erupted in awkward laughter. I looked at my mother, expecting her to defend me. Instead, she calmly sipped her wine and nodded. "He's not wrong, Emily," she said. "You can't expect this family to carry you forever," I reminded her. I had never asked for money, only a place to spend Christmas together. That's when Melissa muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "She's just raising another burden." Lily looked up from her plate, confused, and whispered, "Mommy, what's a burden?" My heart shattered. Before I could answer, my mother stood, pointed toward the front door, and screamed words that would echo in my mind for the next 8 years. "Get out with your daughter. You're ruining Christmas." For a few seconds, nobody moved. The only sound in the room was Christmas music drifting from the speakers, as if the house itself refused to acknowledge what had just happened. Lily reached for my hand under the table, her tiny fingers trembling. She looked at me with frightened eyes and whispered, "Mommy, did I do something bad?" That question hurt more than my mother's words ever could. I forced myself to smile, swallowed the lump in my throat, and quietly said, "No, sweetheart, you did absolutely nothing wrong." I stood, slipped on my coat, and picked up the apple pie we had brought, because suddenly, I couldn't bear to leave even that behind. Nobody tried to stop us. My brother looked down at his plate. My sister rolled her eyes. My mother folded her arms like she had just won an argument. As I opened the front door, icy wind rushed inside. Snowflakes landed on Lily's pink hat while she hugged the stuffed rabbit her father had given her before he passed away. We walked to my aging sedan in complete silence. The heater barely worked, so Lily's breath fogged the windows as I started the engine. We didn't have a Christmas dinner waiting at home. Our apartment refrigerator held half a carton of milk, a few eggs, and leftover soup. Halfway home, Lily suddenly asked if Grandma still loved us. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. "Sometimes people forget how to love the right way," I answered, praying she would believe me because I wasn't sure I believed it myself anymore. That night, we spread an old blanket on the living room floor, heated canned soup, and shared the apple pie by candlelight after the power briefly flickered during the snowstorm. Lily smiled anyway and declared it the best Christmas picnic ever. Children have a remarkable way of protecting the hearts of the adults who love them. After she fell asleep beside the tiny artificial tree I'd rescued from a thrift store, I sat awake until dawn staring at unpaid bills. I realized something painful. As long as I kept hoping my family would rescue us, I would never rescue myself. The next morning, instead of calling my mother to apologize like I always had after every argument, I did something she'd never expect. I applied for a commercial driver's license program that offered paid training to widows and single parents. It meant long hours, exhausting work, and months away from any comfort zone I'd ever known. Most people said women rarely made it in long-haul trucking. I didn't care. I wasn't trying to prove strangers wrong anymore. I was trying to make sure my daughter would never again hear someone call her a burden. That promise became the only thing stronger than my grief. The training nearly broke me before it built me. Most mornings started before sunrise, and by the time I got home, my hands were sore from wrestling a truck that seemed determined to ignore every command I gave it. There were days the instructors barked at me until I questioned whether I belonged there at all. A few classmates assumed I'd quit within the first month. One even laughed and said, "You'll be back behind a bakery counter before spring." I smiled, climbed back into the driver's seat, and tried again. Every evening, I picked Lily up from the neighbor who watched her after school, helped with homework, and waited until she was asleep before studying for the next day's exams. We were exhausted, but we were moving forward. 6 months later, I earned my CDL on the first attempt. I cried in the parking lot while holding the license because it felt like the first real victory I'd had since losing my husband. The job wasn't glamorous. I drove across Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania through rainstorms, snow, and endless highways. I missed birthdays, school plays, and weekends at the park, but every mile brought us closer to stability. My dispatcher noticed. I never complained and soon trusted me with better paying routes. I learned how to manage money with almost obsessive discipline. Every extra dollar went into savings. I refused to finance a new car or buy expensive clothes. While everyone else chased appearances, I chased freedom. 2 years passed, then 3. We moved into a modest rental house with a small backyard where Lily planted sunflowers every spring because her dad used to love them. She grew into a bright, confident little girl who never judged people by what they owned. One afternoon, she came home from school carrying a permission slip for a science camp. She hesitated before handing it to me. "It's okay if we can't afford it," she said softly. I looked at the cost, smiled, and wrote the check without saying a word. Her eyes widened. "Really?" she asked. I nodded. "We don't have to choose between paying bills and letting you dream anymore." She threw her arms around me so tightly, I could barely breathe. That hug meant more than any paycheck I'd ever earned. Not long after that, an older driver retiring from the company offered to sell me his truck at a price far below market value because, in his words, "You've earned your chance." I took the risk. Within another year, I wasn't just driving loads. I owned a small transportation business with 3 trucks on the road. For the first time since that Christmas, I allowed myself to believe the worst was finally behind us. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name I hadn't seen in almost 8 years, Mom. I stared at the screen until the call stopped. A second later, it rang again. Then a third time. Lily was finishing homework at the kitchen table, humming to herself while our golden retriever slept at her feet. Looking around the house we had worked so hard to build, I realized something strange. My hands weren't shaking anymore. 8 years earlier, one call from my mother could ruin my entire week. Now it was just a phone vibrating on the counter. I finally answered. Her voice sounded older, weaker, almost unfamiliar. "Emily? Please don't hang up. I didn't say anything." She filled the silence herself. Ryan's construction company had gone bankrupt after taking on too much debt. Melissa's husband had left, leaving her with loans she couldn't repay. My mother's retirement savings had vanished after trusting a family friend in a bad investment. The large house where she'd once hosted those perfect Christmas dinners was already listed for sale. Then she asked the question I had been expecting from the moment I heard her voice. "Could you help us?" I closed my eyes. 8 years earlier, she had watched her granddaughter walk into a snowstorm with nowhere to celebrate. Christmas. Now she wanted the daughter she had rejected to rescue the family. She spoke as if the past could simply be skipped over. "Families help each other," she said quietly. Those 4 words almost made me laugh. Families help each other. Where had those words been when Lily asked if Grandma still loved her? Where had they been when we ate canned soup by candlelight? I calmly told her I needed time to think and ended the call. That evening, I told Lily everything. She was 12 now, mature far beyond her years. She listened without interrupting, then asked the one question I hadn't prepared for. "If they were mean to us, why do they suddenly need you?" I explained that sometimes people mistake kindness for weakness. They assume you'll always be there, no matter how badly they treat you. She thought for a moment before saying, "You always told me forgiving. Someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you." Again, hearing my own lesson repeated back to me felt like a mirror. A week later, another call came. This time from Ryan. He skipped the apology entirely and went straight to numbers, explaining how much money they needed to stop the foreclosure. It wasn't a request. It sounded like an expectation. When I told him I wasn't writing a check, his tone changed instantly. "So you're really going to abandon your own family?" He snapped. I looked out the office window at the trucks, carrying my company logo across the yard, and answered with complete calm. "No, Ryan. My family is sitting at home waiting for me to have dinner with them. The rest of you made your choice 8 years ago." Then I hung up, believing the story was finally over. I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 weeks before Christmas, an envelope arrived without a return address. Inside was a faded photograph from the last holiday my husband had been alive. He was standing behind me with his arms around my shoulders, while little Lily sat on his lap wearing reindeer pajamas. Folded behind the picture was a handwritten note from my mother. It wasn't filled with excuses or stories about her financial problems. It simply said, "I found this while packing the house. I realized I lost my daughter long before I lost my home. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I finally understand what I destroyed." I read it twice before placing it back in the envelope. For the first time in years, she wasn't asking for money. She wasn't demanding anything. She was admitting the truth. A few days later, I drove to the small apartment she had moved into. I went alone. When she opened the door, she looked nothing like the proud woman who had once ruled every family gathering. Her shoulders were bent, her eyes tired, and the confidence that had filled her voice for decades had disappeared. We sat across from each other for nearly 10 minutes without speaking. Finally, she whispered, "I thought helping you would make you dependent forever. I pushed you away because I believed you were a failure. Instead, you became the strongest person in this family." There was no dramatic apology that erased the past. There couldn't be. Some wounds leave scars that never completely fade. I told her I had forgiven her a long time ago, not because she deserved it, but because I refused to let bitterness raise my daughter. Forgiveness, however, wasn't the same as restoring trust. That would never return to what it once was. I invited her to visit us after New Year's if she wanted to slowly rebuild a relationship with Lily, but I made one thing perfectly clear. Respect was no longer negotiable. She nodded through tears, because she finally understood that love without respect isn't love at all. That Christmas, our home was filled with laughter instead of fear. Lily, now 12, insisted on inviting a local widow, and her young son after learning they would spend the holiday alone. Watching those children decorate cookies together, I remembered the freezing night when we had eaten canned soup and apple pie by candlelight. We had nothing back then except each other, yet somehow it had been enough to survive. Before bed, Lily hugged me and smiled. "Mom," she whispered, "Grandma told me she's proud of you." I kissed her forehead and turned off the lights. "The only person I ever needed to hear that from," I said softly, "was you." In the end, the greatest comeback wasn't proving my family wrong. It was building a life where my daughter would never question whether she belonged. Because in our home, love was never something anyone had to earn.